Hello, everybody. It's Damian Georgiev from the Breakdown Show, and today's guest is Margret Younis. Margaret is a law enforcement instructor, researcher, speaker, and the owner of Hybrid Academy of Behavioral Security Investigative and Behavioral Risk Training firm. She implements science-based training concepts designed to prevent suicide, eliminate workplace violence, and improve the mental health and resilience of law enforcement officers, first responders, and criminal justice professionals. Margaret earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Roosevelt University and a master's of forensic psychology from the Illinois School of Professional Psychology at Argonne University. Margaret is an instructor for the International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association. Margaret's passion can be found in neuropsychological research that explains behavior and decision making process in high stress environments. She investigates concepts of fear, resignment, anxiety, PTSD, depression, suicide, resilience, and performance, including their correlation with the physical brain and psychological mind. Save the Brave, go to savethebrave.org and support our veteran tribe. If you want to support the Break It Down Show, you can go to breakitdownshow.com. You can buy our merch. You can visit our website. You can also visit our YouTube channel. We have a bunch of videos. We have so many exciting episodes and exciting guests. All right, enough of me. Here comes Margret Younis.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This is
Moore.
Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hi, this is Margret Younis, and you're watching The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
So we've got Margret Younis on, and it's an interesting time. She is, I guess you would say in basic terms, she's a police trainer. But I thought I would have my former commander, Erik Kleinsmith, on today as co-host. It's his guest. He helped produce this episode. So, Erik, tell us why we have Younis on the show.
I met Margret just a few weeks ago, and we were both at a law enforcement education and training conference. And it's actually, that was the name of it, ILETA, International Law Enforcement Training and Education Association. And it was a conference they run out of St. Louis annually. And we got to know each other because our booths are my school, American Military University, and Margaret's company, My Hybrid Academy, were just happened to be positioned next to each other amidst all the other booths of what we call in the business cop porn, which is laser range finders, bulletproof vests, laser safe goggles, dry fire weapons trainers, you name it. If a law enforcement trains it was at this conference. And we were kind of, I guess, as trainers and educators ourselves, we're kind of an outlier within that group because, well, first of all, we dress different. The standard uniform was 5'11" tactical pants and a black polo shirt with the logo, and that's your standard, law enforcement trainer who's already walked the walk and is now doing something as their second career. But I was very interested after I met Margret because three things. It's one, just her story. Her personal story is an amazing story of overcoming challenge after challenge and putting in accomplishment after accomplishment in spite of some of the cards she's been dealt. And the other piece is how important it is, even, especially we couldn't have done this on a more appropriate day to highlight the challenges and difficulties that law enforcement officers are going through and continue to go through on a regular basis. And this, from the results of the Derek Chauvin trial, plus all the events of last year, the depression rate and suicide rate of law enforcement has been going through the roof. And, Margret can obviously, as a second piece is kind of go into this in terms of what she's done and what got her interested in working that. And then just the final piece is really wanted to get to know her plans in terms of moving forward and where she sees helping law enforcement in terms of both mental state, but also training and understanding of when we talk about re-imaging police. To me, that's emphasis on training and education is one of the most important pieces. On a wide variety of topics besides just tactical topics, things like that. So that's why, Pete, I really wanted her to come on the show. And again, this is a perfect timing for it. So that's wanted to introduce you, and really then just turn it over to Margret just to start with her background on where she's from and where she is now.
Well, thank you, Erik. That's quite an introduction. Yes, we met at the Alida, Erik and I, and I'm very pleased to be here today because of him. I found him a fascinating human being, and I believe that there's more human beings like him needed on this earth. That's for sure. I want to start from that. But about me, well, I really don't like to talk about my personal stories a lot, but I'm going to try to make it brief as much as I can. So for the past 20 years, I had a variety of different traumatic experiences in my life. I came from a different country in the age of 20, and being here, going to school, raising a family and children. I also was carjacked at gunpoint when I was pregnant with my daughter, and almost actually killed because I decided to fight my perpetrator, and that caused him to get nervous and uncomfortable and angry to the point that he actually fired, and then he missed it. So that was a good thing, and I survived. And also my daughter, because I was pregnant at the time. So that was a very traumatic experience for me. And then the other one, which was equally scary, was me being stabbed about 30 something times and surviving, and not only surviving physically, but also psychologically. Among other events that happened in my life, I decided that, during the course of all these events, the career and or the concept of law enforcement, criminal justice, trauma, and everything else came to the picture and in my life, and I kind of connected all together and decided to pursue a criminal justice degree, started to working for a probation department, and ultimately starting to investigate different areas of law enforcement and security and human behaviors. And then I educated myself on the level of, I got my bachelor's in criminal justice and master's in forensic psychology. And that would be quickly about me, which is a lot. But all those events all together led me to understand the human nature a little better and understand the concept of me being able to, even if after all those traumatic events, I was able to recover quickly. And I was always thinking to myself, well, if I can recover after being almost killed in the middle of the street in the south side of Chicago, and if I can be stabbed many times and survive, and then still be psychologically stable and happy, so can other people. And I couldn't never find the answers. Like, what is there? What is there that I do differently that make me not to go deep into this? So I called the rabbit hole. So I started to focusing on work and research and connecting with the police departments and doing interviews. And as a result of all my work, I created something what I called a suicide schema map or model, which is it's a model that indicates or identified 21 stages prior to a stage of committing suicide. And it took me probably about 2 to 2.5 years to create this map. And it's still a work in progress. And I showed Erik the map during the event in St. Louis, and and I showed also to many officers at the training. And what I've realized, and the feedback from this map or a roadmap to suicide was just tremendous. And I can't even, I don't have words to describe how many emails I receive from people saying thank you for trying to create something like this, and approach the level of or approach the mental health issues from little different perspectives that we were trying to do for years.
So Margaret, I'm just going to interject. What you are doing now was not your original goal when you left Poland to emigrate to the U.S. You were doing something else and had changed your path because of these traumatic events, correct?
Correct. That is correct. Yes. Yeah. So I figured out after all this happens, I wanted to, I knew, or in somewhere deep inside me, that there must be a reason for all those events, and that must be the reason for me to come here. I came here 20 years ago. I have not spoke a word of English. And I'm sitting here today speaking to you, even though I still have an accent, and I'm probably never going to get rid of it, but I'm still here. And with the degree that I have, that I'm very proud of in a very humble way, because I wouldn't know what I know today, and I wouldn't be able to connect all those psychological elements into the real world if not those experiences. So how I start organizing all those things, because I started to see myself from different perspective. I know I can see a criminal justice system from the perspective of criminal justice officer, because I was working on the inside. I was in the probation department. I can also understand the criminal justice or law enforcement officer from the perspective of the trainer. I can understand them from the perspective of the victim, because I observed them being there on multiple occasions. And I can also see it from the perspective of perpetrator, because I've learned a lot, not only in the real world, not only in the beginning when I came to this country, but I also learned a lot during my forensic psychology degree, right? So I can see the situation from different angles, and that's why I never judge anyone for anything, because I have this, I would say, a broader spectrum of understanding of the nature of and then different events that lead to people's trauma, right? Because it all comes down to trauma. And I would say it all comes down to pain. I think it starts from pain. It's like, how long do you feel the pain after, emotional pain I'm talking about, after a traumatic event? If you can narrow your time frame and learn how to mitigate the pain, that's where I think that the key to mental health or to mental well-being is to narrow the time frame of the pain that people feel after the traumatic events.
There's probably never been a more complex time to be a police officer than especially right now today. To keep good people wanting to go into this field, for a lot of them it's a calling, but also to, like you said, look at the other side of this equation. We had a guy named Shaka Senghor who's been in the news recently because he met up with a police officer and they had a good interaction. But when he grew up in Detroit, one of the things he said he said two things that were really shocking to me during our Prison Chronicles series. He said, prison is an extension of my community, right? And that's not a reality any of us want. And then basically everybody in his family he knew had been shot, or they all expected to be shot again. And so there was quite a bit of PTSD where they have all of these negative outcomes constantly happening outside of their control. So you have these two parallels where you have this extremely complex policing problem. I think you have people with this expectation of prison and being maimed and shot and danger around them all the time. How did someone enter into this world, these two competing worlds, and deal with that on a day-to-day basis? You're seeing people at the worst moments of their lives quite often. They've just hit their spouse, someone that they love, or someone has been harmed, or their business has been attacked. All this pain. I mean, how does someone deal with that on a day-to-day basis and steel themselves against it through training and whatever else is available?
Well, that's the tough question. That's the toughest questions we all have. I think the main point is to understand that, in a sense, the trauma is inevitable, right? It's a inherited a part of life. No matter how much, what are we going to do? What we try to do, we're never going to eliminate these elements because people are dying, right? Like we are not immortal. People are dying. People are getting sick. People are getting divorced. We can't expect people not have a divorce because if they at some point don't get along, we can force them to be forever and then feel miserable, right? People are have they're losing jobs. They like with law enforcement, they observe so many traumatic events, and it's hard to so first thing is understanding that this is just going to be like this forever, and it's going to be like this for us, and it's going to be like this for our children, and it's going to be like this for our grandchildren, and so the first so the first thing is to make sure that we are aware that this is it. Now the second a key is to know yourself, in my opinion, to the point that you can answer some questions about yourself to yourself when some trauma happened to you or occur. So if something happened and then you feel pain, let me give you an example. And I give this example during my training. There's one of the trainings that I did. One of the police officer would raise his hand and he said, "Hey, I wanted to ask you a question. I was a first responder at the scene, and then I ran into the burning building, and then I know that there are two children in the building, and I did whatever I could to try to find both of them, but unfortunately, I was able to find. I was able to find one child, but I couldn't find the other." And until today, and that was probably about 2 years ago, until today, I still have nightmares. And he asked me, what am I supposed to do about it? And yeah, it's a valid question. And not only there was a pause in the police department, in a classroom, because nobody expect anyone to bring this into the attention, first of all. So that was a huge breakthrough for this entire department. But to kind of break apart the situation is what happening in this situation is the officer has a feeling of guilt, right? Like he saved one child and he couldn't save the other. So the guilt deteriorates his soul, right? Every single night and every single day, he thinks of himself as on some level insufficient enough in his skills to be able to save the other child. But now if he would kind of look at the situation from maybe a little more, if he can separate his emotions from the logic, right? So there are emotions here and the logic is here. If he can separate the emotions from the logic and realize that logically speaking, neither he's a firefighter, he wasn't skilled enough or trained enough to save the child. So no matter how much he would know or he could have tried it, there was no way for him to do that. So instead of seeing glass half empty, he's supposed to start seeing glass half full because the one child was saved. And this just switch in perspective alone, that's tremendous improvement on the well-being of the individual who just switch the switch from one side to the other. I don't know if that answers your question, but I this is what I think it happened to me on many different occasions. When something happens, it's just okay. Well, it happens. Now I have to deal with it, and I have to make sure that I am going to separate logic from emotions, and that's the only way for me to deal with the pain and to narrow the time frame of the pain.
Yeah, narrowing the time frame of the pain. if there isn't someone to help guide you through this process, if you are, in the public at large, in a dangerous place like Chicago can be, is that possible for someone to do reliably and repeatedly, get themselves through that pain? Or does this take someone to case manage or to go to therapy or whatever it is? How does society deal with this? If we've got a societal cultural problem where people feel that they're always attacked, always going to be attacked, they're always in danger, then we've got a problem that the police can't fix themselves, no matter how good a job they do individually. We've got a different problem to solve.
Yeah, I don't think that they cannot fix themselves. I think it's just they absolutely can. It just has to be a right strategy, I would say. And I also believe like that, like there's a huge initiative or a huge right now, the police trying to implement a program called peer support, which is a program designed of collecting different police officers or making them to or realize which police officer could be certified as a peer support member, and then he can help those other officers at the same rank who deal with the same issues or who need somebody to talk about. So I think that the key is to connect those officers together, and I think this is a wonderful idea to try to make many of those police officers to realize that they are not alone, that other officers deal with the same thing, right? Because everyone thinks that their situation is unique and nobody else is in the same situation, but that's not the reality. Reality is that if we going to each of one of us is going to start really bringing everything that happened to us to the surface, we will be shocked of how many things happened to this person or this person, this person. Just because we see one another on a surface, it doesn't mean that there's not more into us than what we see, right? It's like when you look at yourself in the mirror, you see only little portion of you, which is your outside self, right? And then there's beyond that, you have all the other dimensions. You have your family dimension, you have your work, your career, your plans, your goals, your expectations, your desires, and nobody sees that. So and oftentimes whatever is behind us or inside us in these dimensions that we don't see are much more important than the one that we see on the surface. So having those officers to dig deeper into the dimensions, their own dimensions, and help each other to figure out which dimension needs attention and which dimension needs to be improved. Because one officer might have a good family situation, but he might have a very low respect within the police department for whatever reason, and then he deals with this a concept of conflict within the police department. One, the dimension of the family is fine. So we have to kind of realize which dimension is broken and then help them to fix them instead of focusing on all the other dimensions together.
So that one thing that, as I was talking to Margret during the conference, and then even thinking about later on, is that it's only been recently that we as a nation have identified post-traumatic stress within the military. And one of the issues came through was a former boss of mine is the retired General Carter Ham. I knew him when he was an infantry battalion commander. I was his intelligence officer, and he was one of the first general officers to come forward to admit that he had suffered from PTSD after an attack in Iraq. In fact, specifically the one in Mosul where they shelled the dining facility that he had been in soon afterwards. And so it's coming to the forefront of PTSD within the military. But what we don't realize there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of police officers that, quite honestly, see more what we'd call combat action or tactical action than we ever would, than most folks in the military would. And that's just part of their beat or part of their daily grind. But it's only now that we're recognizing it and we're seeing a lot of patterns, both in the amount of depression, but then the increased amount of suicides among police. And I think, Margaret, you and I were talking about this, is very few police that have done 20 years or so. I don't think any of them can come and tell you that they don't know somebody who has taken their own life.
Everyone can. Right. Absolutely. In fact, they have protocols that they should have, every department, of like what to do or how to inform the family or how to act if there's suicide took place from within the department. So yes, that's almost every police officer knows. Right. At least one person who committed suicide, or another officer, or almost every one of us also knows at least one person who committed suicide. Mm-hmm. Right. That's right. That's a scary statistic. So every I think there's every hour or 240 something people commit suicide. I don't know exactly. I don't remember exactly the number right now, but it scares me that we just keep showing the statistics and then we really not doing much about it. Which it's showing the statistics makes people to realize, oh, maybe this is the way to go, maybe because it's easier. And it's not. And if we're talking about PTSD, if you think about it. It's same thing like with anxiety. When people live in the state of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, they don't live in present moment. They live in the past, right? Because they constantly think of the events from the past, right? So they cannot enjoy anything that they do today. When somebody lives in a state of anxiety, they live in a state of the past and the future. And again, they don't live in the present moment. Why in the past? Why in the future? Because they remember the events that happened in the past, and the future, they don't want to engage, or they are afraid to engage in the events in the future. That's why they constantly live in those two stages, stage in the past and the future, and they're not in the present moment. When somebody is in a state of depression, they live in a past and they don't live in the future at all, because future for them doesn't exist. And then they don't live in the present moment either, because they cannot enjoy anything that is happening today, right? So all those stages, depression, PTSD, and anxiety, all of them make people to not enjoy or be present in the present moment, which also take a toll on the law enforcement, because if the law enforcement officer does not live in the present moment, that means he cannot perform to the best of his capacity, right? So we're losing the skills because they cannot pay attention fully, they cannot focus fully, they use bias and all this experiences from the past, because they have no capacity to see the future if they, for example, live in a state of PTSD or in a state of anxiety. The same thing, right? It's the state of anxiety is a very, very deadly state to be in, and because you just constantly like torn between two worlds, but those worlds are not the worlds that you live in. Those are the worlds that don't exist anymore, because one was back in the past and the one is in the future. Right. So it's very hard to or it's a challenge. It's a challenge, I believe, to make sure that people learn to live in the present moment, and not necessarily by living in the present moment and sitting and meditating, because that's not what it is. It's living in the present moment to make sure that you give yourself to the present moment to the full capacity you can, in whatever capacity or whatever with whatever skills you have or you possess.
I was on the camp where that chow hall got blown up, where General Ham developed his PTSD, and I was just the other day talking to a friend of mine who was a nurse at the hospital that received all of those victims of the bombing. And we were talking about how it had been 17 years, but that day is so clearly burned into our memory because of the tragedy. Now, our plan originally from me and my team, we were going to eat in that chow hall. Something came up, and so we ate in the other chow hall, but we easily could have been there, right there at that time, you know, and these things do linger with you. And it's oftentimes, I don't attribute my PTSD to that event, but I also know that I can't not attribute it. So as an officer, look, as a guy that went on a lot of combat patrols, I was in a heightened cortisol state for so long that kind of became my norm and my normal pathways for response,
Right.
and rewired to this high tension, high pressure, extremely exhausted state of work. And that's kind of how my body's like, this is where we're going to go to. And it doesn't know how to deal with that chemically. But it took a long time for me to realize that. How does an officer, especially because being weak, jeopardizing your career, these are all things where you don't want to self-identify. And if someone else is going to say, hey, this person freaked out, you know, now you're the person that reports someone on your team to say that they need help. How do you deal with that reporting problem? Because it's got to be tough to get police officers to want to either reach out for their friend or to reach out themselves.
Yeah, that's why they don't talk. That's why they don't talk. They don't like to talk because it's detrimental for them. And I don't blame them at all. You know, if they know that they're going to lose job, possibly even permanently, they're going to lose trust within the police department, right? And then they're going to lose trust within their family because the family, maybe they all have police. The father was a police officer, and the uncle was in the army.
It's 3:30.
And all the other family members, and you know, if somebody, and that happens very often, that a young 20-year-old young adult decides to go to become a police officer simply because their family members were, you know, their father and a grandfather, and then they are not even ready psychologically for it, and they are within the police department, or they work there for years with little resentment that they don't necessarily belong over there. So for sure, if there's some kind of trauma, they're going to experience some kind of trauma, they will not talk because that's going to put them in jeopardy on many different dimensions of their life. It's a hard thing to do, and that's why I believe, and this is what my work is focusing on, is to create an algorithm for every possible traumatic event that can happen to the police officers, because it blows my mind that after all the technology and everything that we have today available to this world, we still can't figure this out. There's an algorithm for everything. And if we have algorithms for computers, and if there's it's even like having a surgery or being sick. When you go to the hospital and if you are sick with this, then the doctors and nurses follow step-by-step instructions. So instead of going to the a psychologist when there's an issue, maybe we can figure out all possible trauma. Okay, so there's 100 different traumatic events that the police can experience during the course of their career. And then each of those traumatic experiences, let's break it apart and see how this traumatic event can be fixed and how quick. And then we figure out formula, we write it down for them, and then we just give it to them so they can deal on it on their own. And if they can, then we figure out step B. What's step number A, or step number 1 is to give them a first instruction of how to heal. Right? It's going to be like a healing instruction. And then if it doesn't work after 2 months, then we'll give them a step 2 instruction. And if after 6 months, because usually 6 months is like a threshold for getting better or not, and then we give them number 3 instruction. And if number 3 instruction doesn't work, then we have a problem, right? And then to measure those things. But I think that's to the best way is to give them tools, psychological tools, so they don't have to go and ask for them. They just know what to do on their own.
This is a great way to look at this too, because we have so many other mechanisms to reduce harm for someone. Erik and I both know in the Army, there are certain things that are 2-man carries. You're not allowed to carry it yourself. unless, of course, you are the only person there and you have to carry that big heavy box or whatever it is. But so you try to meter out the exposure to these things. Like if you're dealing with radiation or harmful vectors, you're going to have if measures put into place and countermeasures to make sure that you remain safe. But we don't do the same kind of thing for someone who works in a gang infested area who's, like how many shootings can you see? How many dead kids?
Yeah, right. That's a very good point. Right. Absolutely. And it should be, those things should be measured, to what extent, what's your stamina or what's your threshold of taking a trauma, right? Let's measure how many traumatic events you can actually take from the beginning, right? And teach those officers from the point zero, from the time they enter the police academy, teach them trauma. This is what's going to happen for sure.
Margaret, have you looked into methodologies in terms of being able to evaluate the level of trauma that somebody is at? I know, well, one is if you could briefly describe the 21 steps that you've identified as really kind of, these are your 21 steps to hell in terms of the final solution being suicide, but have you looked at some methodologies that really kind of almost like a point system that says that if I've seen this many shootings, I've been involved in this many deadly incidents, this person is on the brink purely because of the numbers and the stats of what they've surveyed. Can you briefly describe that process as well as where they would then find themselves on, which of the 21 steps they're on?
Right. I don't know if I can share the screen passively. Maybe I can just put it on the screen. Is it possible for me?
Yeah, I can set that up. It's a little more complicated than that, but yeah.
Okay, I don't want to complicate anything.
Okay, we'll keep it simple. How about this? I'll put a link to the thing in the show notes, and if anybody wants to see Margaret's product, well, it'll be available.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so maybe I'm gonna show it just like this for a second.
It's really just I wanted to get into the analytical element.
Look like, and then I'm going to describe the stages one by one. Okay, so this is then it's I call it suicide schema model, and this is a roadmap that identifies the behavioral stages that lead to suicide outcome and explains correlation between those stages. And this model provides support for various theories of suicide and allows actually is designed by me to do the self-analysis and behavioral indicators and your thinking processes, what people think during the stages, and also designed not only for individual for self-evaluation, but also evaluation of other people, right? So the stage number one is called an anger stage. And so this anger stage, usually it's, okay, think about it this way. You drive on a highway, you go to work every day, and then every day you have only 20 minutes to go to work. And then one day something happened and actually there was an accident, and then it took 40 minutes to get to work, right? So something happened unexpected, which it was a deviation from normal events. So let's call this anomaly. So if every one of us have a bunch of those little anomalies as we wake up from the morning time, right? So I wake up in the morning, I go get my coffee, my kids took my favorite mug, and I cannot have my coffee or I don't have a cream in the refrigerator. So this is little anomaly, and that's what makes me a little angry. And then I leave to work, and then there's an accident, and I'm late for work, and that's another thing. And if those things pile on top one another, then ultimately at some point people are just extremely angry, and they encounter something which I call ultimate anomaly. And this ultimate anomaly is this moment when somebody thinks to himself or herself, what am I doing here? I can no longer take this. So this first stage starts from saying to yourself, I can no longer take this. And this is not only identified by me, but also identified by the other people. So if any one of you ever gonna think to yourself, I can no longer take this. What am I doing here? I can no longer take this. That means that it's something is going on. So it's like a little hole of like that then can grow into the rabbit hole, right? But it's like a little hole that it's going to grow with time. So the stage number 2, I call it troubleshooting stage. When people starting to have their sleeping routine disrupted, when their schedule is messed up, when they always on time, but one time or they starting to be not on time. The next stage is anxiety stage. Then it goes to drug and alcohol stage. Then stage number 6, and I'm not going to go to in detail through all the stages, but I'm going to focus on a few of them. For example, stage number 6 is a stupid job stage. When people think to themselves, oh my God, this job is just so dumb. I've been working here for 10 years. I have nothing. I have another 15 years to pay my pension. What am I doing here? My life is not, this is not what I was intending to do, blah, blah, blah. That's the stage number 6. So with this stage comes lower level of performance. That's the first thing first.
I want to jump in. Here. I want to ask Erik. Erik's been a commander before. You know, you're trying to keep your officers safe, Erik, right? And you say you need to execute the self-evaluation, and they're like, you know, I have conducted the self-evaluation. I have gotten a go at this. You know, like oh,
right.
So how do you do this as a leader? How do you get someone to engage genuinely in this process? How do you get the machine to slow down long enough to do this for itself?
And this is why Margret's work that she's doing is so important, because you know she's giving a tool, an analytical tool for a supervisor or a watch commander or anything. She's giving him a set of standards for him to use as a tool to evaluate somebody from. So you know, everything that she's mentioned so far, it comes with a set of indicators or observables that somebody can add onto that patrolman, so that you see, it's like, you know, this guy has never been late his entire life, and he's been late now 7 times within the last 30 days. Something's up, you know, and that's. And you always have when I was in command, one of the things that I was very, very cognizant of is, as I know folks have personal issues, I know folks have personal problems. It's really none of my business until ding, it disrupts their work performance. And that's the things that you start looking for as a commander. Like, as soon as, you know, everybody's going to have a bad day. You know, everybody goes, you know, you're going to have folks who are going to go through the trials of life, whether they're going through a divorce or a loss in the family or just financial hardships, whatever. As soon as that then takes over or takes precedent or disrupts top performance on the job, that's immediately when a commander is going to take a look and say, you know what, there's something up. What Margret's done is she's codified that into several levels and stages of anxiety and performance, of which, you know, and just for brevity purposes, I ask you, you know, what are some of the upper levels look like where you've already mentioned some minor incidents, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of corrective action at this point that say, look, we're gonna just have somebody, you know, make sure you're here on time just to fix that one piece, and then we'll get into later on what your you know, what's the issue or it's a symptom of something else. We'll tackle that later. But that's at the start. So, you know, Margret, tell me about, like, example, like when you get up into the teens, when you find some significant, you know, problems that are you're now not only becoming a threat to yourself, you're becoming a threat to the entire operation and possibly to somebody else's life. Right.
But I want, I want to quickly add to the other question. This map is not only designed to be a tool for supervisors, but also it will be out. If the map will be out there, and as it would be hanging on, let's say, somewhere in a police department, so it's visible to everyone.
Right.
So they don't have to go and sit down and start analyzing themselves. They can just look at it and they will know, because if it all about it all starts with thinking, right? So that's why every single stage has different thoughts associated with it. So it all starts in what people have inside their heads, right? So if somebody asks themselves, if somebody feels terrible, if the law enforcement feels like the world is going to end for him or her, right? It's not, the world is not going to end for him or her. It's all their perception, right? So it all starts from how they thinking about themselves, about or their life. And if they're gonna look at this map and they're gonna see, oh, this is on a stage 11, this is this is my thinking. This is exactly what I think about myself every single day, and this is exactly what is happening in my life. Oh shit, I am on the stage 11. And if there's a 21 stages, I better put my life together because I'm going down. Right? So it's for them to identify where they're really standing in life and how far are they from the bottom.
Right.
Because if sometimes when closer you are to the bottom and but you might still have so much room to improve, but if people don't know how close they are to the bottom, then they that's what they oftentimes they don't know what to do and who to reach out to for them to help them figure out where they're standing, because people don't know where they're standing psychologically, right?
And this is where you get into, and Pete, you've gone through this. You got to go through it. Every soldier's got to go through this. The suicide awareness training, and the shortfall of suicide awareness training is it only tackles the final indicators that of somebody saying, hey, they're giving away all their stuff. He's already at the end, where what Margaret's methodology does is give you so many levels of indicators that you can find and disrupt this chain much earlier on. Even if it's not even a minor issue, you're taking care of the mental wellness of somebody before they get into that stage. When we do suicide awareness training, it's they're only giving us the final indicators to look for, when it's just like, they may be already on the path, and there may be
this person writing a suicide note. They are probably
you're way too late at that point.
And this is the important thing. We lose sight of this, in that when people are that far down the list, if they're at step 21 or whatever it is, you expect them to reach out. They're hanging on for dear life. They don't have a free hand to reach out with. And this is the thing with veterans that I'm always talking about, is way before these things happen, when you see this damage, when they're bitching about their job, when they're getting drunk too much, like, it's okay to drink and have fun, but like, you recognize that this might be a problem. It's way easier to help that person than the person who's just, because it seems to me from the veteran side,
very good point.
It accelerates so fast, where like they're just jamming through all these steps and they get hopeless. And once someone's hopeless, it is really tough to get them.
Yes, that's my 20 stage number 20. It's the hopelessness stage. Exactly. This is stage number. For example, stage number 17 is called bargaining stage, and this is a good stage to know if somebody's even to know if some friend of yours, spouse of yours, child of yours has some issues, because if somebody's saying, if only I have not went through all the other stages, if only I have not isolated myself for a month because I felt that I am useless, right? If only I have not done something else, then my situation today would be much different. So it's a good map or to identify to shows how to identify behavioral and behavioral actually and verbal indicators of somebody who, not only for yourself but for somebody else who's in a very deep depression or very deep stage of close to suicide. So
some of the things that we talked about earlier, just in going forward, I know we're getting near the end of our time, but what are some of the things that you're looking at for moving forward, and how you can get that word out in terms of, there are how many, every state has somewhere around 50 counties. That's 50 to 60 sheriff offices that, each individual sheriff's office is a point to reach out to. There's just not enough Margarets to go around to train all these folks.
That is correct.
So
But
what's your vision going forward on how you'd like to reach out to so many folks?
so I am in the process of creating an event, which is going to be like a peer support, mental wellness and suicide prevention training. And I wanted to collect as many different police officers from different departments, and then connect them in groups, and then provide a training for them for 3 to 4 days, and then have them to take the knowledge of peer support a plan to their respective departments, and then just to start implementing those new ideas. To implementing the training, there's more focus on psychology, on teaching the law enforcement officers about the brain and the function of the brain, and how those elements of emotions and feelings and are all connected to trauma recovery, and teach them how to recover from trauma, and then gather more data that makes us to make the training even better. Because it's as you said, I am the only one person, one Margaret. I mean, even though I have wonderful people around me who help me to put all this together, and I appreciate everything that they do, but it's still, it's not the most data and the most information will come from individual officers. And as we go along with this program, and as we're going to connect more officers together, maybe at some point, one officer, going to connect and going to have this peer support from one officer from New York is going to reach out to the officer from Colorado, because they will connect during those events. And then when something goes south for them, by knowing who to reach out, not necessarily from your own department, but from other departments, might be the way to go, because it's really hard for them to reach out to anyone else, and they don't want to talk to their supervisors, they don't want to talk to the psychologist, they don't want to go talk to their family members either. So the only way for them to really have this support is to just talk to one another. So I think that's kind of my vision. I think it could be another way. We've tried so many things and nothing works. So maybe
It's
something
hard
like
nut to crack, getting people to want to help themselves and help each other.
Right. They're wonderful people, and that's what it breaks my heart when I hear, all the social dislike, I would say, and it's really breaks my heart, because those are people just like us, right? They're wonderful, and they have this hard profession, this hard times, because it's not easy to be a police officer these days, that's for sure. And we just have to start thinking of them just the same way as we start thinking of teachers, right? Teachers have different supports like of any other profession, and give them the need that they really deserve, first of all, big time deserve. Yeah, so that's the plan for the next few months, for me.
So it's a go ahead. It's a train the trainer concept.
Yeah, it's there's a two concept. Train the trainer, it's a one, and the other one I have to talk to, because I've been connecting with the different police organizations, and they help me to facilitate that as well. Because they're the only way to reach out to all those sheriff's departments and correction departments and law enforcement departments, and even military at some point, is to do through organizations like ALIDA, right? Those are the one that support this type of effort. And the response I received from ALIDA, from individual officers emailing me and saying, "Thank you for doing this. This is great." It's really, we're really happy that somebody's actually trying to do something. It really, lifts my spirits. It lifts my spirits that people are, they're willing to. First of all, they're willing, because often, it came to the point that they're really looking for some solutions, right? Absolutely, they're looking for solutions. So the one part of the training would be train the trainer, and the other one would be more focus on those officers that really, really need help, because maybe supervisors recognize that they are in the stage, or maybe they're just something traumatic happened to them, and then they have to take a leave of absence for a little bit, and then it would be a good idea for them to attend this type of training so they can learn about, recovery and how to recover from whatever traumatic event they experience.
And the best way to use resources, myhybridacademy.com. Is that the best place to get this information?
Yes. That's the website. There's also will be my email over there. I think will be. I think so.
There's your email right there.
Yeah. And then there's my LinkedIn. If anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, please feel free. All the information is on the website as well, including the phone numbers and emails. So,
and I'll put all that
if anyone is interested in helping in any of those projects, I really look for people who share the same understanding of the concept of the mental health, understanding of the law enforcement profession, and have a need for some kind of a change and wants to support this profession.
Yeah, for sure. Reach out. She's that kid, and she will take your. She's giving you her email, for crying out loud. She wants to hear from the different agencies and trainers and police folks in general. So if you're thinking that this might be something that will help your department out, for sure, don't hesitate to reach out. The email, her website, all that stuff will be in the show notes. Just click away or write it down now here while it's on the screen. Erik, any final questions for Margaret?
No, I again, it's just to sum up, what a fantastic opportunity to do such a great thing for law enforcement, and just to carry that over into military with the amount of the amount of suicides that we're seeing, and if you can take it as each individual case is a tragedy, but overall, the trends that you're seeing are just as shows an epidemic of the degradation of law enforcement across the country as we continually go through this incredibly stressful times, whether it's through civil strife or whatever. Those have an effect on our law enforcement's ability to do their job on an individual level as well as at the macro level. And this is why what she's working on and what you're doing is incredibly important. So I can't thank you enough for doing that, and can't thank you enough for coming on and talking to us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity of being here. And as I mentioned before, anyone who wants to help, feel free to reach out anytime.